I poured wine at dinner with a perfect smile, 3 days after overhearing my wife planning to divorce me and take half my company. The week before Sarah's family dinner, something felt off. Not the usual kind of off, like when she's stressed about work or annoyed that I left my boots in the hallway again. This was different. She started taking calls in another room, changing her computer screen whenever I walked by, constantly checking her phone when she thought I wasn't looking. After 7 years together, you develop a sixth sense for these things, like how I can tell when a wall isn't plumbed just by looking at it. I never thought I'd be writing one of these posts. I'm not the type to share personal details online, but it's 3 a.m., and I'm sitting here with a glass of whiskey, still shocked that my life fell apart in 3 days. You strangers are getting front row seats to the show because I need to get this out somewhere. A bit about me. I'm Max, 34 years old. I dropped out of community college to start my own construction company from scratch. Started with a beat-up truck and just me. Now I have 5 crews working on projects all over the county. Nothing huge, but it pays the bills and then some. My wife of 7 years, Sarah, is 32. I helped her through law school. While she was studying, I paid our rent, her tuition, all of it. Her upper-middle-class family never really liked the blue-collar guy their daughter brought home. Her father, Richard, works as some kind of financial advisor. Her mother, Vanessa, sells real estate. Her brother, Chris, thinks he's God's gift to business because he has an MBA. I always knew they thought she could do better. The side comments about my little business, or when I was going back to school, never stopped. But I thought Sarah always stood up for me. Sarah insisted on hosting their annual spring dinner last Saturday to show off our house to her family. I helped cook, pressure wash the deck, and got the yard ready that morning. Everything had to be perfect for her family. I'd been up since 6 a.m. prepping the smoker for a brisket I'd been dry aging all week. Sarah was more irritable than usual, snapping at me over little things. I chalked it up to the usual stress of family dinners. Her parents, brother Chris and his wife, and younger sister Megan, who's still in grad school, all arrived at 4 p.m. Her mother immediately started criticizing the furniture arrangement in the living room while her father asked pointed questions about my business, his tone suggesting he was waiting for me to announce failure. We sat down to eat at 6 p.m. I'd set the table with our nice plates, the wedding gifts we rarely use. We needed 2 more chairs from the garage. As I was going out the side door, I heard voices around the corner of the house. Sarah and Chris were having a cigarette by the azaleas, which was strange since she supposedly quit 3 years ago. I was about to call out when I heard my name. I froze. She married this loser, Chris was saying. Dad's right. You need to divorce him before you have kids and get stuck forever. The next thing Sarah said felt like a sledgehammer to my chest. Already working on it. My lawyer says we can take half his business, too. I stood there completely paralyzed as they laughed about how I had no idea what was coming. They talked about how she'd wasted her best years with me while I was playing construction, and that someone named Roger was a much better match for her. Have you ever felt reality shift? 7 years of marriage. All those late nights helping her study for exams. Skipping vacations so she could buy law textbooks. Taking extra jobs to pay off her student loans. Everything suddenly looked different in the harsh light of what I just heard. But I didn't confront them. A cold, calm wash over me. I took 3 deep breaths, backed away silently, grabbed 2 folding chairs from the garage, and put on the fakest smile I've ever worn. I caught my reflection in the hallway mirror as I headed back inside. I looked completely normal. Inside was a nuclear wasteland. The rest of that dinner was surreal. I watched my wife, this stranger across the table, act like nothing was wrong while I poured wine, carved the brisket, and smiled at her dad's terrible jokes. I studied her face, trying to recognize the woman I married. Had she always looked at me with that barely disguised contempt? Or was I seeing it now for the first time? I almost broke down when her mother praised the food and asked for my secret recipe. After 7 years of family dinners, she finally thinks I might know something worthwhile, I thought as I mechanically described the dry aging process. Her sister Megan gave me an odd look once, like she was trying to figure something out. She's always been the only decent one in that family. I wondered if she knew. After dessert, Chris made a toast to family and future changes, smirking at Sarah. I thought about how satisfying it would be to smash that crystal stem across his face as I drank and clinked glasses. They finally left around 11 p.m. Sarah started cleaning up, humming to herself. Humming, as if she hadn't just demolished our entire existence. I told her to get some sleep, that I'd wash the dishes. She kissed my cheek and said, "You're such a good husband." I nearly vomited at the audacity. After she went to bed, I checked her laptop. Password protected. I knew she used the same pattern, but it was new to me. Third time was the charm. She'd been emailing her lawyer for 3 months. The plan was to file after she secured a partnership at her firm, use my money to support her status, then divorce me once it was locked in. There were spreadsheets detailing our accounts, my company's assets, and even a divorce timeline. The transfer records showed she'd been moving small amounts to a separate account for months, just below the thresholds that would trigger notifications. Clever attorney. Clever. I looked at our joint savings. $20,000 was missing, money I'd been setting aside for our future and business growth. It turned out Roger wasn't just a better match. He was already test driving my replacement. I found text with someone saved as our 6 months' worth. 6 months. I didn't sleep that night or the next. On Monday, for the first time in 3 years, I called in sick to work. While Sarah was at the office, I consulted with a divorce lawyer. Tim was recommended by a friend. I told him everything and showed him the screenshots I'd taken. He was direct. In our state, she could potentially get half the value of my business because it grew substantially during our marriage, even though she did nothing to help build it. Even though I'd helped her through school and created it from nothing. I nearly passed out when he told me the potential settlement amount. Everything I'd worked so hard for, everything I'd sacrificed, sliced up and handed to the woman who was going to blindside me. So what? I just bend over and take it. I remember asking Tim. He started talking about amicable settlements and limiting damage, but I was already mentally gone. Something fundamental had shifted inside me. That evening, Sarah asked how I was feeling. Brought home soup, acted concerned. I played along, claiming I was just exhausted and maybe coming down with something. She told me I should see a doctor. My performance was Oscar-worthy. I told her I loved her, nodded, and thanked her for caring. She said those 3 meaningless words back without hesitation as she prepared to execute my financial execution. We sat on the couch, and I watched her scroll through Instagram, pausing to like a picture of us from Christmas that her sister had posted. Couple goals was the caption. I almost laughed out loud. It was like living with a stranger wearing my wife's face. Every action, every phrase seemed calculated. Had she always been this way? Had she changed? Or had I been blind for 7 years? Does it even matter? The truth is, I've never considered myself a vengeful man. When contractors try to cheat me, I usually just cut contact and move on. I help clients who are late with payments. But this was different. This wasn't business. This was my life. Something hardened inside me as I lay awake that second night, watching her sleep soundly beside me, probably dreaming about spending my money with Roger. I've never felt such clarity. You know, Sarah and her family always underestimated me. They thought I was simple because of my calloused hands and lack of formal education. They never realized it takes patience, strategy, and knowledge to build something from nothing. By the next morning, I started making calls to my bank, my business partner, a few key clients. By lunch, I had a plan forming. By dinner, I knew exactly what I was going to do. Does Sarah want war? Fine. But she's bringing a butter knife to a chainsaw fight. Money isn't the issue anymore. The goal is to show her and her entire family exactly who they decided to mess with. The loser they've looked down on for 7 years is about to give them a masterclass in consequences. 3 days after that dinner, I'm finalizing my demolition blueprint. And like any good construction job, planning is essential before you start building. Everything changes tomorrow. Sarah thinks she has it all figured out, but she has no idea what's coming. Neither does her family. Or Roger. Who even is this guy? For 7 years, I supported her dreams. Now I get to watch hers crumble in real time. The morning after I wrote this, Sarah left for work like any other day. She gave me a goodbye kiss, reminded me to call the plumber about the leaky faucet in the guest bathroom, and asked me to pick up her dry cleaning. It was like watching someone sleepwalk through a minefield they'd planted themselves. The sheer normalcy of it was unreal. I started working as soon as her car left the driveway. First priority, securing my actual business. I called my accountant Frank for an urgent meeting at the coffee shop across from my office. I couldn't do this over the phone or at work where employees might overhear. When you're starting a business while helping someone through school, you have to make compromises. Sarah had even helped with some of our early tax returns when we couldn't afford a professional accountant. Frank looked like he hadn't slept in days when we met at the coffee shop. As it turned out, Sarah had already contacted him, asking innocent questions about ownership documents and business valuation methods. She claimed she was helping me prepare for a meeting with a potential investor. Frank had given her some surface information, but felt uneasy enough to flag it. His face went pale when I explained what was actually happening. Then he pulled out his tablet and said, "Max, I need to show you something." He produced a stack of papers detailing my business transactions over the past 3 years, highlighting some discrepancies. It appeared that Sarah had been doing more than just divorce prep. She'd been creating a paper trail to make it look like I was mismanaging company funds, small date inconsistencies, oddly timed amounts transferred between accounts, inconsistently numbered invoices. It wasn't enough to suggest anything illegal. She was too smart for that. But it was enough to make things look sloppy in divorce court, enough to justify hiring a forensic accountant who would charge me thousands and find nothing wrong, but would drag the process out for months. Frank and I spent 3 hours carefully documenting everything, creating clear records showing the legitimacy of every transaction. We paid off equipment loans early, expedited vendor payments, and documented Sarah's complete non-involvement in the company's operations. While we were working, Sarah's sister Megan texted me. This was unusual. We're friendly, but rarely text directly. She wanted to know if we could meet for coffee soon, said she had something important to discuss. I told her I could meet Saturday morning. Next stop, the bank. During dinner, Sarah's brother had mentioned something about their parents helping her when the time comes. I've been thinking about it ever since. In construction, intuition often saves the day. I spoke with our financial advisor at the bank and confirmed my suspicions. 2 weeks earlier, Sarah had applied for a home equity line of credit secured by our house. The house is mostly in my name because I used my pre-marriage savings for the down payment. I'd personally renovated it, increasing its value by nearly $100,000. The document was processing through the system, but I was still listed as a required signatory. In another week, she would have had access to roughly $200,000 in cash that I would be partially responsible for repaying. The advisor looked uncomfortable when I clarified that I hadn't authorized this. After presenting my ID and marriage certificate, I was able to withdraw the application. Then I transferred exactly half of our shared savings, the amount I had contributed, to my own account. Petty? Maybe. But it's far less than what she planned to take. I'm not proud of what I did when I got home, but desperate times. I placed small recording devices in our bedroom and living room, completely legal in our state since it's my home too, but ethically questionable. I positioned a camera in our home office facing her desk. Then I took the dog for a walk around the neighborhood as if nothing was wrong, waving to neighbors and throwing a ball for the Jenkins kid while contemplating the complete collapse of my marriage. Sarah seemed distracted during dinner that night, constantly checking her phone. She gave me vague answers when I asked about her day. Then I saw the name on her phone as it chimed again. Roger. I reached for more pasta and asked casually, "Who's Roger?" Her fork paused halfway to her mouth. She put her phone face down on the table. "Oh, new client at the firm. Time-sensitive case." I could tell everything from that tiny hesitation. I kept playing the relaxed husband. Must be important if he's texting during dinner. She gave me a tight smile. You know how it is. Some people don't respect boundaries. I nearly choked on my garlic bread at the irony. After dinner, she said she had work to do and disappeared into the home office. I made enough noise cleaning the kitchen to give the impression I was busy, then slipped quietly to the hallway near the office door, which she left slightly ajar. I could hear her voice, low and personal. Not her client voice. Not her family talking voice. Her bedroom voice. Can't just call whenever you want. No, he doesn't suspect anything. Just be patient. Yes, I miss you too. I still felt something for her, but every word was another nail in the coffin. I was on the verge of losing the anger I'd been suppressing. If I burst through that door, confronted her, and ended this charade right then, I would have destroyed everything. So I turned away. Back to the kitchen, turned on the faucet. Pretended to wash more dishes while plotting my next move. The thing about construction is that timing is crucial. Concrete won't set properly if poured too soon after rain. Rushing the framing compromises the entire structure. This revenge needed months to fully heal. On Wednesday morning, I accidentally left divorce papers I'd printed out on my bedside table. Just the standard forms from the county website filled out. They were slightly disturbed when I returned from my shower. She looked at them, but she said nothing. Neither did I. At work, I started preparing quietly. Contacted clients who owed me favors, information, not money. As it turns out, Roger wasn't just some random guy. He was good friends with Chris, Sarah's brother. They'd gone to college together. He was the type of man her parents had always wanted for her, from a similar socioeconomic background. The interesting part? Roger had attended numerous family gatherings I'd missed over the years due to work commitments, birthday parties, a ski trip, even a cruise I couldn't join because I was finishing a major project. The project that actually launched my company. Through a mutual acquaintance, I discovered that Roger and Sarah had briefly dated in college before we met. Everything was falling into place. This wasn't just an affair. This was a long game. While investigating all this, I also created a detailed spreadsheet listing every penny I'd spent on Sarah's education, rent, books, tuition, the laptop I bought her for graduation, the bar exam prep course, interview outfits, even the numerous Ubers home from late study sessions because I didn't want her taking public transportation after dark. The total came to $43,600, not including the interest I could have earned had I invested that money in my company instead. That evening, Sarah initiated intimacy for the first time in months. The timing almost made me laugh. Was this part of her plan too? Keep me happy and distracted while she prepared my financial execution? I played along, acting as I should, feeling nothing but detachment. Afterward, I lay in the dark watching the ceiling fan while she slept, counting rotations instead of sheep. One question kept haunting me. How long had our marriage been a lie? Had she always seen it as a transaction? Was I just a stepping stone? I met Megan for coffee on Thursday morning. I arrived early and waited, scrolling through Reddit on my phone. Strangers online continued offering support. Some suggested tactics I'd never consider. Others shared stories so similar to mine that they seemed mild in comparison. The solidarity helped somehow. Megan arrived looking anxious. She's always been the odd one out in that family, more genuine, less concerned with appearances. She ordered a complicated coffee drink and picked at a muffin while making small talk. Finally, she took a deep breath. What she said next confirmed everything. She'd known about Sarah and Roger for months. She'd caught them together during a family weekend at their parents' lake house, a weekend I missed because of a water damage emergency at a job site. She confronted Sarah, who insisted it was a one-time thing. But it wasn't. Recently, during a family dinner I'd also missed, Sarah had confided in Megan while drunk. Told her the whole plan. Stay with me until partnership, then trade me in for Roger, using half my assets as her golden parachute. Megan was telling me this because she couldn't take it anymore. Said she'd always liked me, always thought I was good for her sister. She couldn't understand why her family never gave me a fair chance. I thanked her for being honest and asked her not to tell anyone else about our conversation. She seemed relieved to shed the burden and agreed. As she walked away, she hugged me and whispered, "I'm sorry." For the first time in days, I felt a genuine human connection. Thursday night, I launched phase 2. I created a fake business emergency. Called Sarah and told her I needed all hands on deck for a crisis meeting the next evening. Major client threatening to pull out. Potential financial disaster. Needed her help and her family's counsel. She hesitated. Said she had plans. I pushed harder, let my voice crack a little. Said I was afraid of losing everything we'd built. Played on her guilt. She gave in. Agreed to a last-minute family dinner on Friday. Said she'd call her parents and Chris. Perfect. Friday morning, I made the final adjustments to my plan. Set up the dining room, placing printouts in a folder next to my chair. Loaded every piece of evidence, financial records, screenshots, videos, onto a tablet. Got her favorite dessert from the specialty bakery across town. Made sure everything was in order at work. Had an open conversation with my business partner, who was shocked but completely supportive. We've been friends since high school. He knew how much I'd sacrificed for Sarah's education. Sarah was already home when I arrived, arranging our nice plates on the table. I didn't miss the symmetry. Another family dinner. Same table. Completely different play about to unfold. She looked nervous, constantly checking her phone. She gave me a distracted nod when I asked if everyone was confirmed for dinner. Said her parents were bringing wine. Chris and his wife would be there too. I suggested inviting Megan as well. I watched as Sarah texted her sister, looking surprised but agreeing. The whole gang would be present. Perfect. Sarah asked what the client's issue was specifically, so she could prepare her thoughts. I promised to fill her in over dinner as I headed upstairs to shower and change. Under the shower water, I rehearsed my speech one last time, the order in which I would reveal the evidence, and how I would present the proof. It felt unreal, preparing for the most important client presentation of my life. I dressed in dark slacks, a blue button-down shirt, and leather shoes instead of work boots. Sarah had always told me this made me look most professional. The outfit for my final act as her devoted husband. I could hear her talking quietly on the phone downstairs. Thanks to the recording in the living room, I could review that conversation later if necessary. But I already knew who she was talking to, what she was saying. I gave her one last chance to think she was in control. Let her tell Roger everything was proceeding according to plan. Let her believe she was the smartest person in the room for these final few hours. The doorbell rang. Sarah quickly ended her call. Her parents arrived first, her father bringing an expensive bottle of wine. He shook my hand with that same patronizing grip, asking about this business emergency with barely concealed glee in his voice. Chris and his wife arrived next, then Megan, who couldn't look me in the eye. The whole gang was present, every player in the game. Sarah touched my arm, asking if I was okay. As we headed to the dining room, for a moment, I almost questioned everything. The concern in her voice sounded so genuine. I wondered if I constructed an elaborate conspiracy theory based on misunderstandings and coincidences. Then her phone buzzed in her pocket. I caught Roger's name on the screen before she quickly silenced it, and any remaining doubt vanished. I sat at the head of the table with my evidence folder beside my plate. Her father sat on my left, Sarah on my right. The symmetry with the dinner where I discovered her betrayal was perfect. But now I was the one with secrets. I noticed Megan watching me with a strange expression, a mixture of fear and curiosity. Something was coming, but she wasn't sure what. Sarah's mother asked about the wine selection as everyone settled in. They all fell silent when I stood up, wine glass in hand, expecting me to explain the business emergency. I smiled at each of them in turn, saving Sarah for last. Before we discuss why I called this meeting, I said, raising my glass, I'd like to make a toast to family, to loyalty, and to finally seeing things clearly. Their confused expressions were just the beginning. Neither Sarah nor her family knew what was about to happen next. I calmly sat down and took a sip of Richard's expensive wine. Now, about that business emergency I mentioned. Sarah gave my hand a supportive squeeze. I had to admire her commitment to the performance. I continued, taking out my tablet. I discovered some major issues that put everything I've built at risk. Issues that are happening right under my nose. Richard leaned forward, his smugness barely contained. Money problems? Cash flow issues? Your business approach always seemed risky to me. The problem isn't with my business, I replied, connecting my tablet to our TV. It's with my wife. The room went silent. Sarah's hand froze on mine. Max, what are you doing? She said. The thing is, when demolishing a building, you don't start with the roof. You begin by undermining the foundation. The recording of Sarah and Chris from the previous dinner filled the room. Chris said she needed to divorce me before having kids and getting permanently stuck. Sarah responded that she was already working on it, that her lawyer said they could also take half of my business. I watched every face at the table. Chris turned pale. Sarah's mother covered her mouth. Richard clenched his jaw. Megan closed her eyes as if witnessing an impending car crash. And Sarah simply sat there, paralyzed as her carefully crafted plan collapsed. I then displayed carefully edited screenshots of her conversations with Roger. Damning, but edited. 6 months, I said quietly. You've been seeing him for 6 months while I've been working 60-hour weeks. I looked at her parents. Did you know she was cheating, or just that she planned to divorce me? When Richard tried to interrupt, I wasn't finished. I swiped to my spreadsheet. All the money I'd invested in Sarah's education, $43,600. I built my business from nothing, and this is what I invested in our future. The next page showed the canceled home equity application and documentation of her secret bank account. This is how she planned to thank me. The silence was overwhelming. Then, almost simultaneously, 3 things happened. Richard knocked his chair back and stood up. This is ridiculous. We're leaving, Sarah. Sarah grabbed my arm. I can explain, Max, please. And cowardly Chris tried to delete messages under the table. I pointed at him. I already have the text you're deleting. Every time you helped her orchestrate this. Chris froze, then looked at his wife, who was staring at him with shocked eyes. Sarah changed tactics. It wasn't like that, she said, tears in her eyes. I was unhappy. We'd been growing apart for years. Growing apart, I repeated. While I was funding your education. While I was building our future. Something snapped. I lowered my voice to a whisper. 7 years. I believed in us for 7 years, and I was just a stepping stone the whole time. Her father took over. Whatever issues you two are having are private. But if you think this ambush will intimidate my daughter, you're wrong. You have no idea the resources we have at our disposal. I laughed. Resources? You mean the $20,000 she took from our joint account? or the home equity line she tried to secure against my house. While Richard was ranting about everything they'd done for us, I noticed Sarah texting under the table. That's when I revealed the final secret. Did Sarah mention that Roger is also married? I said casually. The room went silent. Richard stopped mid-sentence. Yeah, found that out yesterday. His wife's name is Jennifer. Very understanding when I showed her the text between her husband and my wife. Sarah's face drained of color. You what? We had coffee yesterday. Seemed only right that she should know. Richard lost it at that point. He grabbed the edge of my hand-built dining table and flipped it over. Everything went flying. Dishes, wine, food. Sarah screamed. Her mother gasped. Chris jumped back. I sat there strangely calm, watching 7 years of pretense shatter around us. Only Megan moved to help clean up. Across the chaos, our eyes locked, and she gave me a slight nod of respect. With shaking fingers, Richard pointed at me. You think you've won? You're nothing. You build things with your hands because you weren't smart enough for college. My daughter made a mistake slumming with you, but we'll fix it. I slowly stood up. I may work with my hands, Elijah, but at least I built something real. What have you built? Besides a family of liars. He lunged at me. Actually tried to throw a punch. Chris barely managed to hold him back as he shouted threats about lawyers. James, please, let's talk privately, Sarah insisted. I didn't want it to be this way. How did you want it to be? I shook my head. To steal half of what I created while sleeping with someone else? There's nothing to discuss. I opened the front door. I think it's time for you all to leave. Chris pulled his father outside. Megan, the last to leave, paused at the door. I'm sorry, she murmured. You always deserved better. Then it was just Sarah and me in a ruined dining room. Where are you going? She asked in a small voice. I already have a hotel room. I'll come back for my things when you're at work tomorrow. You planned all of this, she said quietly. I grabbed my already packed overnight bag. I learned from the best. You'll regret this, she called after me as I walked out. My father wasn't bluffing about the lawyers. I didn't answer. Some foundations are too rotten to rebuild on. I slept better that night in the hotel than I had in months. The next day, while Sarah was at work, I returned home. I left my key on the counter and packed just the essentials: clothes, tools, family photos, my dog's things. I'd already rented a small apartment near my workshop. Not hiding, just making space. I called my staff to let them know I'd be working remotely to handle personal matters. For 2 days, I avoided social media, ignored emails, and focused on setting up my new space. The dog adjusted quickly. Animals can sense when something's wrong in a home. On the third morning, I finally turned my phone back on. It immediately buzzed with notifications. 47 WhatsApp messages from Sarah, ranging from angry to pleading. The first 2 were all caps. You've ruined everything, and how dare you embarrass me like that? Then they evolved. Please call me Max. I know I made a mistake, but we can work through this. We need to talk. By message 30, she was bargaining. I'll go to therapy. I'll cut off my family. Just please talk to me. Message 45 was simple. I'm sorry. The last 2 arrived at 3:14 a.m. I told Roger everything, even the divorce plans and the money. He says we should stay together, followed by he just called to break up. Says he's trying to save his marriage with Jennifer. Now I have no one. As I read through them without responding, I felt nothing but exhaustion. Not satisfaction, not vindication, just a sense of emptiness, like completing a difficult job knowing the client will never appreciate it. I was still scrolling when another message appeared. I know you've read these, Max. Please tell me what you want. Money, the house, whatever you want, I'll sign. She still didn't understand. It was never about the money. It was about betrayal. Wasted years. Stolen trust. I finally replied, the divorce papers have already been sent to your office. I just want this to be over as quickly as possible. She responded immediately. Can we meet? Just to talk, please. Before I could reply, my phone rang. It was Tim, my lawyer. Jennifer, Roger's wife, had contacted him after I showed her the evidence. After doing her own investigation, she discovered Roger had pulled similar schemes with other women. She wanted to compare notes for our divorce proceedings. I looked around my small apartment as Tim spoke, a mattress on the floor, unpacked boxes, and the dog watching me patiently. Starting over at 34 wasn't how I'd pictured my life. But sometimes, repairing a compromised foundation requires tearing everything down. I agreed to meet Jennifer for coffee. Not romantically, but because shared betrayal creates a bond. I hung up and sent Sarah one final message. There's nothing to discuss. The marriage is over. Please use our lawyers for all future communication. Then I blocked her number. That afternoon, I took the dog hiking. My phone buzzed with a text from Megan. Heard you moved out. Mom and Dad are hosting Sarah. Mom is finally questioning what really happened, but Dad is on the warpath. His perfect daughter facade is crumbling. Thanks for letting me know, I replied. Hope you're doing well. I'm actually better than okay, she wrote back. I finally told them I'm leaving the program they chose for me to pursue what I really want. I guess your courage was contagious. I watched my dog exploring as the sun began to set, tail wagging carelessly. 7 years. Hours upon hours. Work, a planned and then ruined future. Freedom, too. Truth. A chance to rebuild something authentic. My phone buzzed again. Jennifer confirmed our coffee date, with a link to a support group for people dealing with divorces involving financial deception. Apparently, it's more common than I thought. I put my phone in my pocket and called the dog. Time to head back, make dinner, unpack. Small steps, one day at a time. The foundation is the first step in any successful building project. And this time, I'm making sure it's solid.